It had been 5 years since I'd seen my family, 5 years of silence, distance, and pretending we were strangers who happened to share blood. I wasn't exiled with screaming and slammed doors. No, their rejection was quieter, colder, and much more effective. It came in the form of ignored calls, unsubtle silences during holidays, and the absence of my name in family group chats. At some point, I stopped reaching out, and they seemed relieved by the silence. So when the call came from my father's lawyer, not my mother, not my older brother Alex, I almost didn't answer. I stared at the caller ID for a good 30 seconds, thumb hovering over the decline button, until curiosity outweighed pride. His voice was calm, detached, like he was ordering a sandwich. "Your presence is requested for the reading of your father's will. The funeral is this Saturday, 10 a.m., St. Jude's." He hung up without waiting for confirmation. I thought about not going. I thought about staying home, eating ramen, and pretending none of it mattered. But it did. Maybe not the money, maybe not the will, but the fact that even in death my father still had something to say, and I needed to hear what that was. Or maybe I just wanted one last chance to prove he had been wrong about me. The funeral was everything I expected, cold, formal, and soaked in performative grief. Alex was front and center, arm around Mom, dressed in a sleek black suit like a goddamn politician. I stood in the back, far from the family, wearing the only black jacket I owned, one with a barely noticeable tear under the left arm. No one looked at me. No one even whispered. I might as well have been a ghost. When the priest spoke of my father's integrity, his devotion to family, and his unshakable values, I almost laughed. Integrity? The man who couldn't even accept his own son for being gay? Devotion, please. After the ceremony, we drove in a quiet caravan to the lawyer's office. The Connolly family attorney, Mr. Hargrove, had known us since we were kids. He used to give Alex candy during meetings and call me the quiet one. Now he greeted me with a nod that barely passed for acknowledgement. We all sat in a small conference room filled with mahogany furniture and the lingering scent of old books, and the tension was thick enough to slice with a knife. Mr. Hargrove opened a leather folder and cleared his throat. "This is the last will and testament of Mr. William Connolly." I sat up straighter. This was it. The moment where I'd either be insulted outright or erased entirely. "To my eldest son, Alexander Connolly," he began, "I leave the entirety of my estate, including all properties, business holdings, and liquid assets." My stomach dropped a few inches. Okay. Breathe. Maybe there was something symbolic left for me. A letter, a watch, anything. "To my younger son," he continued without looking at me, "I leave this. The hope that he continues to find his own way. I trust that the life he's chosen will reward him in ways money never could." And that was it. No house, no money, no heirlooms. Just a vague hope wrapped in condescension. My ears rang with white noise. I didn't speak. My mother didn't glance in my direction. Alex's lips curled ever so slightly into a smug half-smile. He didn't even have the decency to hide it. As people began to stand and stretch, preparing to leave, Mr. Hargrove held up a hand. "One last thing. Mr. Connolly left a private note, for Elijah only." That's me. The quiet one. I froze. Everyone else paused. My mother's brows tightened. Alex rolled his eyes. Mr. Hargrove handed me an envelope. Thick yellowed paper addressed to me in my father's neat, slanted handwriting. I shoved it in my pocket and walked out without a word. I didn't want them to see my hands shaking. I waited until I was alone in my apartment, sitting on the floor with a glass of cheap wine before I opened it. There were just a few lines, but each word cut deeper than any silence ever had. "If you're reading this, then I'm gone, and I probably deserve whatever version of hell you believe in." I didn't say much when I was alive, and I doubt this note will fix that. But there's something I need you to know. Look in the bottom drawer of my office desk, the locked one. The key is taped under the right side. I left you something. It's not money, but it's yours. I stared at the letter for what felt like hours. Not money, but mine. What the hell did that mean? A box of old photos. A stack of apology letters never sent. A final insult? I didn't know, but I had to find out. That night, around midnight, I drove to the old house, the one Alex now technically owned. He wasn't home. His car wasn't in the driveway, and the lights were all off. I still had a key. No one had ever asked for it back, and I never offered. I slipped inside like a ghost, avoiding the creaky spots in the floor I still remembered from childhood. The study looked almost untouched, like time had stopped the day my father died. His chair still had the faint indent from his shoulders. The desk was locked as promised. I felt under the right side, and sure enough, there was the key. He really had taped it there. Inside the drawer was a small black metal box, surprisingly heavy. I opened it to find 3 things: a USB drive, a manila envelope, and a photo. The photo was of me and him, back when I was maybe 10. We were fishing, or pretending to, both smiling like the world hadn't yet cracked between us. The envelope was sealed, labeled simply "Confidential." The USB had a label too, typed, not handwritten. It said, "For him only." I didn't know what any of it meant, but for the first time in a long time I felt something from him that resembled an acknowledgement. Not love, not regret, but maybe purpose. He gave Alex everything tangible, but he gave me something else. Something hidden, something secret, and something that just might change everything. And that was the real inheritance. Growing up in the Connolly household felt like living on a stage where I was always the understudy, never the lead, barely remembered when the curtain rose. Our house was big, cold, and polished to perfection, much like my father's expectations. Everything had to look good, sound good, and most importantly, be good. And in his eyes, good meant being like Alex. My older brother was the golden boy. Tall, charismatic, naturally athletic, straight-A student without ever opening a damn book. He had this effortless charm, like he was born knowing exactly what our parents needed him to be, and he gave them that, wrapped up in a perfect smile sealed with good manners and accomplishments. I, on the other hand, was different. I liked quiet things, books, music, drawing. I asked too many questions, cried too easily, and didn't care about football or golf or any of the Connolly family weekend traditions. They said I was sensitive, like it was an affliction. My father used to say it with a wince, like the word itself tasted sour in his mouth. I remember one afternoon in 7th grade when I came home with a small trophy from a state art competition. It wasn't a big deal. 3rd place, but I was proud of it. I walked into the living room, heart racing, holding it like it was gold. Alex was on the couch talking to Dad about his baseball tryouts. I waited for a pause in their conversation and then held it out. "I won something," I said. My dad glanced at it, nodded once, and said, "That's nice. But make sure you don't let your grades slip because of doodling." That trophy went into a drawer and stayed there until I left home. But the real fracture didn't come until I was 16. That was when my parents found out I was gay. Not because I told them, God, no. I wasn't brave enough for that. No, they found a series of texts on my old phone, ones I had stupidly forgotten to delete. A boy from school, nothing scandalous, just honest, raw, human. The confrontation was ice cold. No yelling, just silence. My mother sat with her hands clenched so tightly her knuckles turned white. My father stared at me like I was a stranger who'd broken into the house. "Is this who you are?" he asked, voice flat. "Is this what you've decided to be?" Like it was a career choice. I remember looking at Alex, hoping for, support and a word, a glance. He looked away. After that day, things were never the same. Conversations became shorter, dinners quieter. Every family photo included a forced smile from me, surrounded by real ones. I started coming home later, staying in my room more. At school, I found my peace in the music room, playing piano until my fingers hurt. At home, I found nothing but walls. Cold, beige, suffocating walls. By the time I was 19, I couldn't take it anymore. I had scraped together enough savings from part-time jobs, scholarships, and tutoring gigs. I packed my things in 2 suitcases and left a note on the kitchen counter. "Don't worry, I'll find my own way, just like you always wanted." I thought maybe someone would call. Maybe Mom, maybe even Alex. But no one did. Not that week. Not that year. Not ever. College was hard. Not academically. I thrived in the classroom. But emotionally, financially, I was constantly 2 steps from falling apart. I lived in a shoebox apartment with a leaky sink and paper-thin walls. I worked nights at a bookstore and weekends walking dogs. Sometimes I skipped meals to pay rent. But for the first time in my life, I was making decisions for me. And despite everything, I was proud of that. Still, the ghost of who I had been, the son who was never quite right, followed me everywhere. Every time I saw a father and son laughing in the park or a family having dinner through a restaurant window, I felt it. That quiet ache. That little voice that whispered, maybe if you just tried harder. Maybe if you were someone else. There was one night during my sophomore year that I hit rock bottom. My account was overdrawn by $43.27. I had 2 bags of rice, half a jar of peanut butter, and rent due in 5 days. I sat on the kitchen floor, shaking, trying to breathe through a panic attack. And in that moment, I actually considered calling home, just to hear a familiar voice, just to remember that someone remembered me, but I didn't, because I knew what would happen. There would be pity, maybe a lecture probably, but not love, not warmth, and definitely not help. I built my life from scratch. I got an internship at a nonprofit, then a job offer. I moved cities, found a partner who didn't flinch when I cried during movies. Slowly, piece by piece, I stitched myself together. No thanks to them. And yet, standing in that study, holding a box my father had left just for me, I couldn't stop the flood of memories. The way his voice used to echo down the hall when he called Alex for dinner. The way my mother only ever hugged me on Christmas. The way Alex never asked me once if I was okay after that day. I wasn't angry. Not exactly. Anger burns fast. What I felt was colder, slower, something like grief, but not for the dead. Grief for the boy I used to be. The boy who thought maybe, just maybe, he could be enough. Now I stood there as a man they had never seen, holding something they didn't know existed. A piece of my father's conscience, maybe, or guilt, or fear. Whatever it wasn't for them. It was for me. The invisible heir. The one they forgot. The one who wasn't chosen, but might just be the only one left who can tell the truth. It had been 3 weeks since the funeral, and the sharp sting of betrayal hadn't dulled one bit. In fact, it had fermented into something colder, sharper, an emotion somewhere between rage and resignation. I'd buried the letter from my father in the bottom drawer of my nightstand, the same way I'd tried to bury any remaining desire to understand him. But on that rainy Thursday morning, something pulled me back. Maybe it was the silence of my apartment, the way the raindrops tapped against the windows like an impatient reminder, or maybe it was the way his handwriting haunted my memory, clean, precise, like he never meant to leave anything messy behind. I pulled the envelope back out, stared at it for a moment, then finally tore it open. The letter wasn't long, but each word was weighted. If you're reading this, Elijah, then you haven't given up. I know I don't deserve your time, but I need you to listen anyway. I failed you. I let my pride, my fear, and my ignorance dictate how I treated you. I wish I could blame it all on how I was raised, on the legacy I was taught to uphold, but that would be a lie. I knew better. I just chose not to be better, but I see you now. I've always seen you, even when I pretended not to. I read those lines over and over, my throat tightening. They weren't an apology. Not really. But they were something. Something more than the silence I'd been used to. I kept reading. There's something else. Something important. Something I couldn't say in front of your mother or Alex. Something that could destroy this family, but also set the record straight. In the safe behind the bookshelf is a hard drive. The code is your birthday. Reversed. I know only you would remember that. What's on that drive? It explains everything. And I'm trusting you, not because I have the right to, but because you're the only one who won't use it for the wrong reasons. My hands shook as I folded the letter. The safe behind the bookshelf. Of course. I hadn't even thought to check it the last time I was in the study. My father had always been paranoid about external threats. Rivals, competitors, even journalists. But the real threat had been inside the house all along. I returned to the estate just after dawn the next day. Alex had already moved in, redecorated, and made it his own. The walls that once held our childhood photos now displayed minimalist art, abstract and impersonal. But the study was untouched, as if time had ignored that one room out of respect, or guilt. The bookshelf was tall, dark oak with rows of dusty business books no one had touched in the years. I ran my fingers across the spines until I felt a subtle groove on the far left. A small latch clicked when I pressed it, revealing a hidden compartment. Behind it, embedded in the wall, was a small electronic safe. I punched in the numbers. 092489, my birthday, reversed. The lock released with a soft beep. Inside was a black external hard drive, a handwritten sticky note with the word START, and a second envelope. Smaller, thicker. I didn't open it yet. I just stood there for a moment, listening to the quiet hum of the house, the way the air seemed to hold its breath with me. Back home, I connected the hard drive to my laptop. A password prompt appeared. I stared at the blinking cursor. Then I remembered. Your birthday reversed. I typed it in again. The screen flickered. A folder appeared, labeled in all caps Alex Docs. Inside were dozens of files, spreadsheets, emails, PDF reports. My first instinct was confusion, then dread. I opened the spreadsheets first, clean columns of numbers showing large sums of money being withdrawn, rerouted, hidden. There were shell company names I'd never heard of, fake vendor invoices, offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands. The dates lined up with the period when my father's health had started to decline, when Alex had been helping out more with the company. I clicked into the emails. Some were brief, messages between Alex and a man named Grayson Bell, someone listed as a consultant. In one, Alex wrote, "Make sure the next batch is washed clean." My father's still reviewing ledgers, but he won't last much longer. Once I'm CEO, we'll move faster. My stomach turned. I could feel my pulse pounding in my ears. The room felt smaller, hotter. Betrayal had a smell, I decided. It was metal and sweat and the lingering sting of realizing you'd trusted the wrong people your whole life. Then I saw the video folder. There were 6 files, each labeled only by date. I opened the first. It was grainy footage from a security cam angle inside the study. My father sat behind his desk. Across from him was Alex, legs crossed, grinning. My father's voice was tired but clear. "I know what you've been doing. Don't lie to me." Alex laughed. Actually laughed. "You're old, Dad. You think you can run a company in this century? Come on, I'm just getting ahead of the curve." "You're stealing," my father said. "From your own family." "No," Alex said, leaning forward. "I'm taking what I've earned, what I deserve." I clicked through the rest of the videos. Each one was worse than the last. In one, Alex mocked board members for being gullible sheep. In another, he bragged about shifting assets under false names. But the last one, that one was different. My father sat alone facing the camera directly. His expression was heavy, but calm. "If you're watching this, Elijah, then I'm gone. And your brother has fooled everyone else, but not you. You always saw people for who they really were. That's your gift. Use it now. Do what I couldn't. Tell the truth." I slammed the laptop shut, not because I was done, but because I couldn't breathe. My throat burned, my vision blurred. I paced the room, heart racing. It was too much, too heavy. I wanted to scream, to cry, to crawl out of my own skin. I opened the second envelope. Inside was a handwritten note. Bank codes, account numbers, even a notarized letter of transfer, all addressed to my name, not Alex's. It took a few minutes to process. Then it hit me. This wasn't just evidence. This was leverage. This was everything Alex had built, on lies, theft, manipulation, and my father had handed me the key to either destroy it or protect it. But why me? Why not the police? Why not the board of directors? Maybe because he knew I wouldn't act on revenge. Maybe because he knew I'd struggle with the moral line between justice and destruction. Or maybe this was his final test, his final apology, his final way of saying, "I see you now." I sat down on the couch, laptop still warm beside me, hands still trembling. For years I had wanted just one word, one sign, that I mattered, that I had been wronged. And now I had it. All of it. Too much of it. So the question wasn't whether I could bring Alex down. It was whether I should. I thought back to the last real conversation I had with my father 7 years ago, in that very same study. He had stood by the window, sipping whiskey, not even looking at me. I had just told him I got accepted into NYU with a partial scholarship. I was proud, beaming. He just nodded and said, "That's good, but what will you do with it?" Like my ambition was a burden. Like a success only mattered if it followed his blueprint. And Alex, of course, had followed it to the letter. Now, standing over his grave with a folder full of secrets, I felt the sting of that moment again. But it didn't break me like before. It sharpened me, like a blade against whetstone. I realized I wasn't carrying the burden of this truth. I was forging something with it, something bigger than revenge, something that looked a hell of a lot like justice. Later that night, I sat in my apartment, staring at my cluttered wall where I'd pinned printouts of emails, graphs, screen grabs. It looked like the inside of a detective's office. In the center, Alex's smug face from a business magazine cover. Legacy refined, Alexander Connolly reinvents the family brand. Bullshit. He wasn't reinventing anything. He was hijacking, and I had the receipts. The thought of walking into a police station with this stuff made my stomach twist. What if they dismissed it? What if they warned Alex first? What if it backfired and he sued me for defamation? That was the legal world I knew. The real world wasn't always on the side of the truth. It sided with power, influence, headlines. But then another thought hit me. What if I could hit him where it hurt most? Not just legally, publicly, permanently. My phone buzzed. A message from Darren, my partner. It just said, "You okay?" I stared at it for a while, then I replied, "Not yet. But I will be." I knew I couldn't do this alone, so I made a list. People I could trust. Journalists who still cared about ethics. Lawyers who owed me favors. Professors who remembered me not just as the quiet one, but the one who did the work others avoided. This wasn't just a leak. It would be a reckoning. But still, that small voice lingered in the back of my mind. The scared, invisible boy who used to sit alone at dinner, who flinched at his father's disapproval, who once begged his brother to let him tag along to baseball practice just to feel included. That voice whispered, "You're not strong enough. They won't believe you. You'll ruin everything." I clenched my fists. "No," I whispered aloud. "He ruined everything. I'm just cleaning it up." I didn't look back when I walked away, but I could feel her eyes on me, cold, sharp, the same way they had always been. For a moment I hoped she might call after me, say something, anything. But she didn't, and that silence was louder than any scream. Outside, the midday sun cut through the glass ceiling of the conservatory like a spotlight, but it felt too bright, too warm for a moment that had left me cold. I stepped onto the gravel path surrounded by rows of blooming orchids and hanging ivy. It should have been peaceful, serene, but all I felt was a slow, burning ache spreading from my chest down to my hands. I sat on a bench just outside the koi's pond, watching the fish glide beneath the water's surface. They didn't know betrayal. They didn't know shame. They just existed, unbothered, uncomplicated. I remembered a time, maybe I was 9, when my mother had brought me here after one of my piano recitals. I'd stumbled through the Chopin piece, missed a few notes, and cried afterward backstage. I thought I had ruined everything. She took me here, bought me a strawberry tart, and said, "Mistakes don't matter if you carry yourself with grace." I'd held on to that moment for years, believing foolishly that maybe she saw me. Maybe she loved me in her own quiet way. But now I saw that moment for what it was. Performance. Image. She hadn't comforted me because I was hurting. She had done it because people were watching. Because she couldn't let them see her child fall apart. And now, when the curtain was down, when there was no one to impress, she had looked me in the eye and called me a stain. A complication. I don't know how long I sat there, letting that realization sink into my skin like cold rain. But eventually I stood up. I walked to the edge of the koi pond, took a deep breath, and let go. Not of the envelope, but of the guilt. The need for her approval, and the hope that maybe somehow this confrontation would heal something. There was nothing to heal. Because she had never tried to love me, only to shape me into something I never was. By the time I got home, the sun was already beginning to set. My apartment smelled like old coffee and printer paper. I tossed my jacket onto the couch and opened my laptop. The folder was still there on my desktop, Alex Docs. I clicked it open, scrolled through each file again, not because I needed to, but because I wanted to be sure, to feel every detail, every number, every word, because when I acted, there would be no room for regret. I opened a blank document and began writing a summary. Clean, professional, matter-of-fact, no emotion, just truth. I attached the most damning files, bank transfers, internal emails, and 3 of the video clips. The 4th, the one where my father speaks directly to me, I kept to myself. That one wasn't for the world. That one was mine. Then I opened my email. I had 3 drafts saved from the night before, each one addressed to someone different. The first, a senior investigative journalist I had met years ago at a university talk. The second, an old professor who now sat on a corporate ethics advisory board. The third, a junior partner at my firm, someone I trusted, someone who still believed in truth. I hovered over the send button, heart pounding. This was it. No turning back. Then my phone buzzed. A message from Darren. "Whatever you're thinking of doing, I'm with you, even if it blows up the world." I smiled, a soft, broken thing. Then I hit send. One by one, 3 messages, 3 packets of truth launched into the world like torpedoes. Then I sat back in my chair, breathed. It was done. No fireworks, no music swelling in the background, just the quiet hum of the fridge and the weight of my own heartbeat. I didn't know what would happen next. If the world would care. If Alex would finally face consequences. If my mother would hate me even more than she already did. But I knew one thing. I was done being quiet. I was done being erased. I was done waiting for someone to save the family's name. Because the name was already ruined. And now, the truth belonged to me. That night after Darren fell asleep, I lay awake staring at the ceiling. The weight on my chest had shifted. It wasn't gone, but it had changed. It no longer felt like I was being buried by it. It felt like something I could carry, something I could use. For years I had tried to outrun the pain. Now I was learning how to walk with it. I glanced over at Darren, curled up beside me, one arm dangling off the bed, snoring softly. He was ridiculous, messy, too generous. And somehow the safest place I had ever known. He didn't save me. He didn't fix me. He just stayed. And that was enough. The next morning I called my boss and took the week off. I told her it was personal. She didn't ask questions, just told me to take care of myself. A small mercy. One of many I was beginning to notice now that I wasn't constantly looking over my shoulder for someone's disapproval. We set up a planning wall in Darren's spare room. Posters, printouts, timelines, names, red string, like something out of a conspiracy thriller. But it wasn't paranoia. It was clarity, strategy, truth organized. One of Darren's cousins was a freelance graphic designer and helped us create a professional microsite, a timed drop page that would go live at the exact moment Alex stepped on stage. It would contain everything: documents, videos, a timeline, quotes, and sources, all neatly categorized for maximum public digestion. The design was sleek, minimal, brutal. The title? Legacy. Unmasked. I was hesitant about making it public at first. It felt too aggressive, too loud. But Darren reminded me, this isn't about rage. It's about exposure. And he's built his power in the dark. Meanwhile, Darren's mom, now fully invested, contacted a friend who worked in local media, a mid-size independent outlet with just enough reach and just enough integrity. The editor reviewed the site, cross-checked the evidence, and agreed to prep a feature story to publish within the same 10-minute window. What struck me most during those days wasn't the planning or the coordination. It was how natural it all felt. How smoothly things fell into place once I let go of fear and leaned into purpose. I wasn't just reacting anymore, I was building. The night before the gala, we took a walk through the city. It was cool and windy, the sky a blanket of stars barely visible between skyscrapers. We passed by a newsstand, and right there on the cover of a glossy business magazine was Alex's face again. Smiling, confident, and wearing a navy blue suit and that signature smirk that had started to look more like a mask the longer I stared at it. The Connolly Legacy, a new era. I bought the magazine, not out of nostalgia, but as a reminder of the lie. Later I sat alone on the balcony flipping through the article. It was the same recycled praise, young visionary, respected leader, the kind of man you'd trust with your investments and your children. No mention of the man behind closed doors. No trace of the father he betrayed. No shadow of the brother he abandoned. But soon, all that would change. The gala was set to start at 7 p.m. sharp, live-streamed on multiple platforms with hundreds of guests in attendance. Alex would be delivering the opening speech. A victory lap, really. A moment of glory. The final touch on the image he had so carefully crafted. We would give him the stage, and then we'd give him the truth. I stood in front of the mirror that afternoon, adjusting the collar of my blazer. I hadn't worn it since my father's funeral. It still fit. A little tighter around the shoulders, maybe, but I liked that. It meant I had grown. Darren came up behind me, resting his chin on my shoulder. "You ready?" I looked at him through the mirror. "Yeah, I think I am." "You're not just confronting him, you know," he said. "You're confronting everything they told you you'd never be." I nodded. Good, because they were wrong. We didn't go to the gala. We didn't need to. We sat in Darren's apartment, laptops open, fingers hovering over keys like two kids about to launch a rocket. At exactly 7:02 p.m., just as Alex's voice echoed through the main ballroom, the microsite went live. 10 seconds later, the article dropped. Hashtags we'd preloaded into anonymous accounts began trending within minutes. It was like watching a storm roll in, slow at first, then sudden. People started sharing, commenting, screenshotting, forums lit up, business subreddits exploded. Even finance Twitter, normally too jaded to care, had something to say. I didn't feel joy. I didn't feel revenge. I felt clean, like someone had peeled away years of silence and expectation and finally let the truth breathe. If there was a moment I knew Alex felt the ground shift under his feet, it was at exactly 7:09 p.m. 7 minutes into his keynote speech, the first journalist stood up and left the ballroom, not quietly either. She grabbed her bag with a sharp movement and looked at her phone like it had just betrayed her. At 7:10, the live chat during the stream started going wild. Questions were pouring in. None of them had anything to do with innovation or Connolly Enterprises' future. By 7:11, someone in the crowd held up their phone, showing a reporter next to them the documents we'd leaked. A moment later, a ripple of murmurs spread through the room like a virus. And at 7:12, Alex's face twitched. It was subtle, just the corner of his mouth, a flicker in his eyes, but I saw it. The polished camera-ready mask cracked for a split second. And that crack? It was everything. I watched it all unfold from Darren's couch. Laptop open, chat windows flying, hashtags trending. My heart was pounding in my chest like I was sitting in the front row, even though I was 3 miles away eating cold Chinese takeout. The chat was chaos. Stock analysts were tagging each other. Corporate law Twitter was dissecting the financial documents. And Reddit? Reddit was losing its mind. By 7:30, the official Connolly Enterprises account posted a bland statement. We are reviewing the claims being circulated and will respond appropriately. By 8:15, 2 things hit my inbox. One was an email from a Connolly board member. The other was a message from a senior journalist at the same outlet where Alex had given his last fawning interview. Both had received the same thing. A video. A video I had labeled The Lesson. The video was from years ago. I must have been 21, maybe 22. Alex had come home from grad school and decided to show me how the real world worked. He'd sat me down in Dad's office, same leather chair, same oak desk, and pulled up a dummy spreadsheet on his laptop. He was grinning like he was teaching me how to ride a bike. Everyone does it, he said, laughing. You just have to keep the paper trail clean. Numbers are like shadows. Easy to stretch, easy to hide. I remember nodding, asking questions, writing everything down. I wanted so badly for him to see me, to treat me like I belonged. I didn't realize I was getting a lesson in fraud. What neither of us knew was that Dad had already installed cameras in the office. Hidden, quiet, watching. That video, paired with the financial files and internal emails, wasn't just incriminating. It was damning. By 9 p.m., the Connolly board called an emergency session. They wanted to speak with me. Directly. I didn't reply. Instead, I queued up the second part of the drop. A scanned collection of handwritten audit notes from Dad himself. Notes in his neat, blocky handwriting, pages covered in red ink, annotations, anger, regret. One line stood out more than anything. This is not the legacy I built. At midnight, the company's website crashed. By morning, the stock had dropped nearly 15%. And by noon the next day, my mother stood outside our family home facing the press. She wore dark sunglasses, but I could tell from her voice. She had been crying. I want to say, she began, voice tight, that I did what I thought was best, for my husband's legacy, for my children, but silence is not protection. It is permission, and I can no longer be silent. She paused. Her next words hit me like a gut punch. My youngest son, Elijah, revealed to the world something I could not bear to face. I was wrong. He was right. I watched the live stream in silence. Darren sat next to me, holding my hand. His thumb traced circles on my knuckle while I sat there, frozen. I didn't know whether to cry or scream. Instead, I just breathed. Alex didn't make a public statement. Not that day, not the next. For 3 days, he vanished. And when he finally reappeared, it was in the back seat of a black SUV pulling up to the federal courthouse. No tie, no smile. Just hollow eyes and a lawyer gripping his arm like a leash. Every outlet covered it. Some called it a tragedy. Others called it justice. But the most viral per-bay post of the day, a 17-second clip from the old office footage. Alex saying, plain as day, you just have to keep the paper trail clean. People kept asking me what I wanted, what I planned to do next. Are you taking over the company? Will you sue your family? Are you writing a book? Number. And no, I didn't want power, I didn't want money, I didn't want a crown made of broken glass. What I wanted was simple, to end the cycle. So I wrote one last email. To the board. I'm not asking for money, I'm not asking for position, I'm asking for reform, for oversight, and for something good to grow out of this wreckage. Then I made one request. A scholarship fund in my father's name. Not for legacy students, not for heirs, for outsiders, misfits, and quiet kids. The ones no one ever bets on. They approved it. Unanimously. I didn't go to the press conference when they announced it. Instead, I went back to the old house. It was empty now. The curtains drawn, the rooms echoing with ghosts. Out in the backyard near the fence there used to be a pear tree. Dad planted it when I was born. Said it would grow as I grew. It died years ago. But I brought a sapling with me. Darren helped me plant it. Just the two of us. Quiet. Focused. Think it'll make it? He asked, brushing dirt from his hands. I looked at the sky. The clouds were starting to break. If it doesn't, I said, at least it'll die honest. He taught me how to manipulate, how to steal, how to survive in the dark. But life taught me something else. I learned how to stand in the light. And sometimes, that's enough. A few weeks after the storm passed, I sat down at my desk, opened a blank document, and stared at the blinking cursor for a long time. I wasn't sure how to start, but I knew exactly why I was writing. This wasn't for the press, not for the board, not even for my family. It was for the ones who would come after me. The quiet ones, the outcasts, the disappointments, the ones who were pushed aside just for being who they were. I titled it simply, My Will. It felt strange to write those words. I didn't have much to leave behind. No company, no house, no financial empire. But maybe, just maybe, I had something better. I wrote, if you're reading this, I'm probably gone. But don't let that make you sad. I lived. I loved. I lost. But I told the truth. And I was loved by people who never needed me to hide who I was. That's more than I ever thought I'd have when I was younger. I don't have money or property to give. But what I do have, I want to leave to people like me, those who were left behind by the people who were supposed to protect them. I leave this story, not as revenge, not as bitterness, but as a reminder that surviving is not shameful, that your truth matters, that family is not defined by blood, but by who stays when everything else falls apart. When I finished, I sat back and read it all again. It wasn't grand, it wasn't poetic, but it was real. It was mine. Sometimes I still walk past the old Connolly building. The name is different now. The glass looks the same, but the energy around it isn't. People walk by it like it's just another office, but some glance up like it's a piece of history. And it is. Just not the kind of history that anyone brags about anymore. I don't feel anything when I see it. No pride, no hate, just distance, like a place I used to live in a dream. The legacy I care about lives somewhere else. It lives in the scholarship fund I set up, the one that now sends updates to my inbox every month. I get emails from students all over the country. Some of them write long, emotional letters. Others just say thank you and send a selfie on their first day of college. One kid from Georgia wrote, "Thank you for turning what happened to you into something that helps the rest of us." That line stayed with me. It still does. I never spoke to Alex again. The last image I have of him is from the courthouse steps. Tired, pale, no tie, flanked by a lawyer who looked like he regretted accepting the case. He took a deal, of course. Fines, probation, banned from managing any financial institution, and again. Some say he got off easy. No, but I don't think so. Because he lost the one thing that ever mattered to him. The illusion of being untouchable. My mother never called back after that day in front of my apartment. I haven't heard from her since. I sometimes wonder what she thinks when she sees my name now. If she ever Googles me, if she reads the articles, or sees the impact. But I've learned not to chase ghosts. That silence is just another kind of closure. I don't need anything more from her, not anymore. Sometimes people ask me if I feel like I got justice. I always pause at that question. Because the truth is, I didn't want revenge. I didn't want to destroy anyone. I wanted freedom from shame, from secrets, from pretending I was something I wasn't just to make someone else comfortable. And in that sense, yes, I got justice. But not because they fell. Because I rose. In the end, I didn't take back anything that belonged to the Connollys. No property, no money. I didn't want it. Not because I'm some kind of saint, but because I refused to inherit something built on lies. I told the board, I don't reject the legacy. I reject the disease that came with it. Instead of claiming the throne, I built something else. A path, a door, a chance. For someone like me to walk into a room that was never meant for them and take their seat without apology. On the last page of my will, I wrote, if you have to choose between being accepted and being authentic, always choose authenticity. Because real family, real love, will never make you hide who you are. And if they do, they were never your people to begin with. A few months later, I went back to the old house for the last time. It was empty now, for sale. The lawn was overgrown, the driveway cracked, but the backyard still held a memory. There used to be a pear tree near the edge of the fence. Dad planted it when I was a baby. Said it would grow with me. It didn't. It died a few years after I left, so I brought a new tree. Darren helped me plant it. It was small, fragile, barely more than a stick with some stubborn green buds. As we knelt in the dirt together, I looked at him and said, think it'll survive? He glanced up at the sky, the clouds just starting to part, and replied, if not, at least we gave it a chance. And that's what this whole thing was, really. A chance. To be seen, to be heard, to live a life that wasn't decided by other people's fears. In the end, the most powerful kind of revenge wasn't the exposure. It wasn't the fall of a company or the public disgrace of a golden boy. It was peace. The kind of peace they never expected me to find. The kind they couldn't steal, fake, or silence. Because not every inheritance is money. Some are lessons, some are names, and some are just the courage to speak when everyone else told you to stay quiet. And if that's all I leave behind, I'm okay with that. Not every inheritance comes with money. Some legacies are born from pain, silence, and the courage to speak up when everyone else turns away. Family isn't always where you're born. Sometimes it's the place where you're allowed to be your true self. You don't always need fire or revenge to win. Sometimes just telling the truth is enough for greed to collapse on itself. And sometimes, victory isn't about making them bow. It's about standing tall without needing anyone's approval and without apologizing for who you are. Have you ever been pushed away by family just for living your truth? Share your thoughts in the comments, because your story might be the legacy someone else needs.